Pastor Charlie Delaney,
Yes, sir.
this is a special moment, obviously, because you are Jeff's father-in-law, and you just spoke this weekend. I'm going to try not to get choked up because it was a good message.
Thanks.
I was really touched by it, and from a pastor to another pastor who's really walked a great ministry journey with his family and helping people. Thank you for setting that example. All I kept thinking was exactly what you preached of, like, I think I got a little closer to Jesus. And then on top of that, though, I really felt like that's exactly the type of pastor I want to be. So thank you for that. You are a blessing not only to Jeff and his family, but a blessing to this church and to a lot of us. I remember I was telling you earlier, I came here in 2015, and so all throughout the years, I've definitely gotten to see you preach at our church, and just it's always been a blessing and so much wisdom and just So I'm just honored.
Well, it's a real joy to be at ONE&ALL. We always look forward to coming, and of course, Jeff is an easy guy to pick on. So
Correct. Yes.
If you can tell a few jokes about Jeff, then they forget about what else you say. So you can say anything you want. So
exactly, yeah. and they'll want you around more often. Huh?
Yeah.
But yeah, let's dive into your message, the journey home, and a race well lived. And I think specifically just talking about your journey of how you came to Christ, and then specifically of like your calling to be a pastor. Like what did that like look like, and how? I mean, were you nervous? Were you scared? All of the stuff.
Well, Drew, it's interesting. When I grew up, none of my family went to church anywhere, and it was only when I became 13.
Yeah, wow.
And my brother started going. My dad had died. My mom wasn't in the church. I had a sister that wasn't in the church. But my brother actually started coming and got us to come. So he actually led me to the Lord.
Wow, that's cool.
But I remember, if you can look on the books of the Maxwell Street Christian Church in 1952, you'll have it's a decision book or edition book. There's my brother 1 month, the next month me, the next month my sister, and the next month my mother.
That's
and
cool.
It made all the difference in the world. And before that time, our family were not interested in the years ahead. They lived for the day. None of my family had ever graduated from high school. None from college. And in fact, college didn't even come into the picture. But when I gave my life to Christ when I was 13, when I was 18, I ended up in Bible college. And if it hadn't been for that, that would have never happened.
Yeah, wow.
And then, we were in ministry for a few years, and in 1968, we felt the call to go to Africa, and that was a big challenge.
I bet.
One thing, we had 2 daughters, ages 3 and 4, and to take them away from their friends, and of course we left our friends, but to take them away, I look back at it now, it's something we felt like we needed to do, and I think if I had to go at my age now, it would take more faith now than it did back then. But the Lord was so good to us. We were having a great ministry in Johnson City, Tennessee, and when I resigned to go to the mission field, we had no money in the bank. Not a cent. And the church was gracious enough, and we had no place to live. The church was gracious enough. They said, well, you can live in the parsonage rent-free until we get a new minister. Well, I thought, well, man, it'll take them 6 months to get a new minister. So I had it made, I was trying to raise support during that time. They found a new preacher in 2 weeks. So we had to move out. I remember we didn't know where we were going to go. There was a godly lady of the church came up to me and said, Charlie, I want you and Betty to come with me. So we went, she said, I have some apartments over here. And I said, well, I didn't know that. And she said, I want to show you one. And we went into that apartment, and I'm telling you, it was 3 times better than the parsonage.
Wow.
And it had wall-to-wall carpeting, and we didn't have that at that time.
Yeah.
Curtains that went from the ceiling all the way to the floor. And she said, I want you and Betty to move in here. And her name was Hazel. And I said, Hazel, there's no way we can do this. I have no money. She said, no, I want you to move in rent-free for 4 months. And if you haven't raised some support by that time, then we won't worry about it. But from that time, the Lord provided.
Wow.
And we went out not knowing. I think at one time the Apostle Paul said we went out not knowing where we were going, what was going to happen. And basically that's how we went to Africa.
Right,
And, so we went out trusting the Lord, and the Lord supplied our needs all the way through.
Wow, that's awesome. And what a testament of being faithful to where God is calling you to be. And like you said, you're taking two young children, so it's not easy. Yeah.
And one of the things that we faced was education and medical. And in fact, we had people come up to us and say, "Are you going to take your kids with you?"
Yeah.
And I said, "No, we're going to put them in an orphanage, and we'll be gone 3 years. When we come back, we'll pick them up."
Right.
But we took them with us, and we faced some issues. I know I got really sick my first term, and in the hospital, left weighing 106 pounds. I mean, I almost died.
Yeah.
But the Lord took us through, and all through those days, the Lord provided financially and health-wise, education-wise. They were able to go to an international school that's set aside for ambassador kids and so on like that in the country. So they got a good education. The health facility, we were in the Eastern Province, and the hospitals, you wouldn't go to a hospital. And there are no doctors there. There just happened to be another mission that was about 20 miles from where we lived, and they had 2 doctors there that were on the mission station. So we had actually 2 doctors that we could go to anytime. So the Lord provided all the way through. And,
wow. That's super amazing. And how long were you guys out there for?
We were in Africa about 25 years.
25 years. Wow.
And what's good about that, a lot of times missionary kids struggle, and we really tried to make our home a home. And we would come home every 3 years. And we would stay about 9 months.
Okay.
And the reason we did that, we wanted our kids to be able to at least go through one school year here in the States every 3 years, and so that they didn't lose contact with America, and we'd come back to their friends. And so when they ended up graduating from high school, then they both wanted to go to Johnson Bible College. And so they ended up going back on the mission field to Africa, and that's been a blessing through the years.
Oh,
and,
definitely.
And now, of course, Robin married Jeff, and she met him in Bible college, and I don't know what in the world she was attracted by him, but somehow they got together.
Somehow, some way,
But the Lord's been, funny. You walk out on faith, and I mentioned about Hebrews chapter 11. There were a lot of those people were just common, ordinary people, but they had an extraordinary faith. But we've been blessed to cross paths with other missionaries, to cross paths with different pastors, and people in the church who have great faith. And so all the way along, we've been encouraged as we walk
Which is awesome.
faith. There are people walking right along with us.
Oh, that is awesome. Did you ever find, or did you ever see a difference between spending time out there for 25 years and then seeing the church through like Western eyes?
Well, it's completely different, When we would go to Africa, of course, we'd go back in time. We went in 1968. And that Africa where we went does not exist now. Back then, our mail would take 2 months to get to us. There was no internet. And when we first went over, there was no telephone. So communication was different. And we went back in time. When we go to a village, they live the way they live for hundreds of years.
Right.
And
Yeah.
a lot of their income would be less than $100 a year.
Yeah.
And so we served people there. Then when we would come home, we would see a big difference in 3 years of what has taken place in America.
Yeah. Right.
And when we went back to Africa, it was the same. You know, they didn't change that much.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you go to a service where we served. One of the last places we went, the leader of the church had a cell phone out with the order of service on it. Well, we never liked that back then.
Right.
But, you know, when we went, one of the things we found simple faith.
Yeah.
You know, just, you know, the Lord talked about a childlike faith.
Yeah.
And people that had nothing, and yet they heard the message of God, and they had a childlike faith and said, that's what we want.
Yeah. And how important it is that even in the simple faith, God can do really, really big things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have stories upon stories of many miracles and just many people being moved.
Well, you know, and of course, the One&ALL Church, they're acquainted with Denford Chisanga.
Yeah.
And Denford started coming to a church in Zimbabwe where we were working with. The church, when we went there, had about 6 people, and it grew. We built a building, and Denford was there. And I was able to witness to Denford and baptize him into the Lord. And
that's cool.
The good thing about that is that Denford took hold of the faith, and a great man of God. And when we left, in fact, in the country of Zimbabwe, at one time we probably had 70 or 80 people, missionaries, and now they're, as far as coming from the States, now they're probably 4 or 5 at the most. But at one time, there were a lot of missionaries. And so when the missionaries left, then the work was left up to the people. And Denford kind of stepped into place there where the missionaries were. And he's done a such better job. I don't know of any missionaries that has done what Denford is doing. He knows the people, knows the culture, and he's a humble spirit. And he's got a tremendous ministry. So the Lord led us to cross paths with him. And even though we're here, his ministry is still carrying on, and the work is still growing.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's important to talk about too. Is like, as missionaries, we're not trying to change the way people live or the culture of it. We're trying to bring in the resources and the gospel message.
Absolutely.
And the way Denford has really said, thank you for the resources. Thank you for bringing Jesus in my life. Now let me establish this here.
And the whole point, you know, when we went, we didn't go to change the culture. And we didn't go to change the government. It needed to be changed a lot. But we went over there to bring Christ. And that's what we did. And that's been a lasting effort because I know the first church that we started back in 1968, I just got a video of them a couple of weeks ago. And when we built the building, we had a petition kind of in the back part of the building. They tore that petition out because they needed more room. And this video showed the people coming into worship of a building that was built in 1968, and they're still going strong. And that's you know, you preach eternity, but and you see things like that happen, you know, it's going to go on until Christ comes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's almost like, eternity is not only eternity, but Jesus Christ is here too during our time in the here and now, and how important that is to have people have experienced the Holy Spirit. Which is so awesome. And I just still want to keep getting to know more of your stories and how you pastored and how you shepherded people. What was the balance between like your family and ministry?
Well, that's one of the difficult things, I think, and I think it's more of a problem in the States than it is for men on the mission field. When we went there, you know, we didn't have television. And we didn't have cell phones. Of course, back then we didn't either. But we tried to really have a home life for our kids. There wasn't a drug problem in Zambia at that time that it is now. And some of the problems that kids face, you know, our Shannon and Robin grew up with kids, and when We left Africa and they went with us. Some of those kids,
Yeah.
they suffered or they were affected more by the culture than Shannon and Robin were.
Yeah.
So one of the problems that preachers have is they neglect their family. In
Correct.
fact, I think of a preacher right now that meant a lot to me through the years, and I talked to their sons back some time ago, and they said, when our dad was starting out, we were neglected. It wasn't until almost the end of his life that he realized, and he apologized to us. And so it's important,
Yeah.
you know, to preach the gospel, but you've also got your family.
Right,
That's
exactly.
important. And
Yeah.
so we really tried to do things that would
Right.
make up for them being away from their
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah. And it's so vital, especially when you're a pastor and
Yeah.
you're starting out and you're excited to preach, you're excited to shepherd people. I think a lot of young pastors, we were kind of talking about this earlier, just have this anxiousness to just like, hey, I want to work on this area, or I want to be in this stage and do these things. And but that's not the way that Jesus has called us to be and to shepherd people, which I believe that's something that you have done very well.
It's interesting, you know, when we left, our kids had to leave their friends. And we'd come home every 3 years and they'd make contact again with their friends, and it was great for them.
Yeah.
And then after about 9 or 10 months, they'd have to say goodbye to their friends here and go back. But in the process, the missionary family over in Africa, all of the missionary kids became their brothers and sisters,
Right.
and their aunts. We were aunt and uncles to all I still have missionary kids that, in fact, just a couple of years ago, preached a funeral for one of our missionaries. And their kids say, Uncle Charlie, thank you for doing that.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And we did have one lady that I thought she was old back then. I think probably only about 55 or 60.
Okay.
But she was single and had cancer and came home and was treated and went back. But she became the grandmother of all those kids.
That's so cool.
And because, you know, her kids didn't have a grandmother. And so right now, when I look at Shannon and Robin, they've got friends all over the world. You know, they still make contact.
Yeah.
They've still got the friends they started out with. And then they've added so much more.
Right.
So
yeah.
in a lot of ways, that's been a blessing.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Becoming the kingdom of God, right? It just expands with friends and just expands with people that are doing ministry with you. Is so important. I definitely want to touch on faith, and I love your point of, you know, the journey home is a journey of faith. Yeah. And how many times you have to latch on, believing that and trusting that God is who He says He is, and as well as moving in your life. Is there any part of your journey where you were like, not like, oh, I'm going to give up, but honestly, to a point where you're like, maybe God, this wasn't the right decision?
Well, I think the hardest time, one of the hardest times I faced is that we went to Zambia. I don't think I ever met anybody in America that I couldn't talk to because I knew the language. Yeah. When we went to Zambia, there were 64 different dialects. Yeah. And I mean, so we went over there. We go out to the village. We couldn't talk to people. So after about 4 months, 5 months, that was a discouraging time because we left America thinking, man, this is going to be easy. We're going to start churches. And after 4 months, or probably more, 6 months, we had nothing to show for it. And, now, I often speak about the churches were gracious enough to send us to Africa. Yeah. But they only raised enough money to give us a one-way ticket. Yeah. And during those early months, if I'd had a round-trip ticket, I probably wouldn't have stayed 25 years because it was really difficult. Yeah, yeah. So it took a while to learn the language, learn the people. Yeah. And another thing, there were about 7 missionary families who went to Zambia about the same time. Well, yeah. We were all just as green as we could be. None of us knew what to do. So we depended on each other. Right. And it's amazing what God did with those 7 families, because there are churches now scattered throughout out Zambia. But there were missionaries that came and didn't make it. Right. They couldn't handle it. Of course, some of them got sick, had to go home and everything like that. But But yeah, there were discouraging times,
Right, definitely. Yeah.
but some good times.
Right, exactly. I mean, like you were saying earlier of when you got really sick
Yeah,
too, that must have been on the edge of like, should we go back?
yeah,
But a
yeah,
one-way ticket, and you're like, no, we got to trust God.
yeah.
And what does that look like with your own faith and spending time with Jesus?
Well, you know, when we decided to, we were at a ministry in Johnson City, Tennessee, and
Yeah.
it was going great. You
Mhm.
know, the preachers always talk about their honeymoon time at a
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
Well, we were there 3.5 years. It was like a honeymoon the whole
Yeah.
time. We built a new building.
Yeah.
Attendance tripled.
Yeah.
I mean, we couldn't ask for a better thing.
Right. Right.
And then I heard this missionary speak, and the Lord just laid it on our heart to go.
Yeah.
So even though the ministry was great here in the States,
Yeah.
we felt God wanted us to go someplace else,
Yeah.
and that took faith,
Yeah.
to resign. And
Mhm.
I know there were some people that really, I'd come home on furlough and they'd say, "I don't understand why you'd leave us.
Yeah.
Well, how could you do that? We
Mhm.
needed you."
Mhm.
And I remember one time I spoke and told about some things that happened in Africa of God
Mhm.
working in the lives, and
Yeah.
that lady came up after the service, and she said, "Now I know
Mhm.
why you left,
Yeah.
because of your ministry in Africa." So,
Yeah.
yeah, the walk of faith is not always easy,
No.
you know.
No.
And
Yeah. And yeah, it never is, but yet Jesus reminds us it's worthwhile.
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
I kind of want to be a little selfish here because I mean I'm speaking to a great pastor, and so I just want to keep picking at the pastoral side. Um, so if I could, like, advice would you give for a young pastor like myself, or a lot of these younger preachers? Kind of like what we were talking about earlier.
yeah.
We want the grand scheme of things. We want the big part of Christianity, of churches, of evangelism, but sometimes that's not the reality.
Yeah. You know, Drew, I think probably the best times we had here in America is that when we took the church in Johnson City, Tennessee,
Mhm.
there were a couple of guys that I'd been to Bible college with. They were preaching down there,
Mhm.
and then others that we met. But we had such a great relationship
Yeah.
with preachers. And, you know, we talk a lot about mentoring
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
how you need to mentor.
Yeah.
Uh, Back then, preachers knew each other well
Yeah.
because, you know, you would fellowship with.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like here in California, and it's changed in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Used to, we'd have a men's fellowship,
Mhm.
we'd have preachers fellowship. We'd get together once a month,
Yeah.
and there's real camaraderie. We'd talk about the church.
Right.
Nowadays, the preachers don't know each other.
No.
You know.
Mm-mm.
Now, you all here, of course, at ONE&ALL, you have a staff where you
Mm.
are together, but there are a lot of churches don't have that. I think if a lot of preachers don't have that, I think if there's one thing I would say, you need to get a mentor.
Mm.
But I would say get one that's your age, and you
Mhm.
all talk about things back and forth.
Yeah.
Someone said that the loneliest time for a missionary is when he comes home and goes to a preaching meeting, because they talk about their ministry, and when you
Yeah.
talk about mission work, they have no idea. So
Right.
if preachers have a mentor that doesn't know what he's going through,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
hard
Yeah.
to really mentor. So
Yeah.
I would encourage young ministers,
Yeah.
find someone that's in ministry, maybe not someone's on staff, find
Yeah.
another preacher
Yeah.
somewhere, and really have a time where you get together once a month and just talk about, you know,
Right.
what you're facing, what are you doing, how are you
Yeah.
handling this, and
Yeah.
uh, that'd be one thing I'd suggest.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I really love that, and I think that's very helpful and needed because, yeah, like we're saying, um, a lot of young pastors just they want well, everything's on our phone, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like I want to be the biggest influencer, Christian influencer. I want
Yeah.
to preach on this stage. I want to speak at conferences are a big thing in right now in Christianity, and it's like I want to be on that stage. I want to speak
I want
here.
to be known. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
well, you know, we talked a few moments ago about Bob Russell when he
Mm-hmm.
went to Southeast.
Yeah.
They started a church there. Um, I know if you talk to him, they didn't go out thinking we're going to establish a mega church.
Right.
It's just the type of ministry he had. It ended up a mega church.
Right.
And I know I was on staff at a Bible college in
Mhm.
Ohio, And a lot of the guys that would never preach until they graduated.
Yeah.
And I'd say, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to start a mega church.
Yeah.
And having no idea what a mega church was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think, I mentioned in the sermon today about preaching in a little country church. That could probably be one of the best experiences that any preacher would have, is to take a little country church sometime and work with it, because you'll have all kind of problems.
Yeah, right.
But yet you can see what ministry's about.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's really, really good stuff. We can spend hours. I can spend hours just asking a lot of questions, and so we'll end it because I want to end it on a personal note of just. Well, I already was telling you just how blessed I am of your sermon, but looking back at your life and the faith journey and what has been the best bits of life for you?
Well, I think looking back, the Lord has blessed our ministry. One of the blessings is our two daughters following in our footsteps for a period of time, going back to the mission field and having a desire to serve the Lord. That no doubt is a blessing.
Yeah.
But I think that, and I think we had about 40 churches that supported us when we were in Africa, and we still have friends in those churches. And so I look back at just the churches and the families, not only here, but also in Africa, that we've been able to be acquainted with and be able to share with. All of that's a blessing, and it makes you realize you're part of a bigger family.
Yeah.
And in fact, your family grows so much. And Jesus said, if you leave mother or father, I'll supply.
Right.
And we've seen that. And,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's been good. Well, if I can again just say thank you for your ministry, thank you for your heart. I'm sure looking back, you would have never thought the impact that you've made, not only through Jeff, but through this church as well. Like you're I feel like saying like you're our grandfather, and it's cool to see that not only do you have grandkids, but you have great grandkids. And I'm sure that's been such a blessing.
Oh, absolutely.
To have them and to be with them. And so, I just love your heart. Thank you for setting the example. Thank you for preaching a message that I believe is timeless. And we're so happy that you're here and you officially taken Jeff's spot. So I'll see you here next week.
Well, it's always a joy to come to One and All. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share here today.
Yeah, oh, definitely.